Thank you very much, Bryn, for those kind words. I'm actually not going to talk so much what I've done in the past today, but I'm more going to focus on the Rotary World Peace Fellowship and the things that I have learned during these 1.5 years. So to start with, I'd like to just give you some moments or some memories from the past 3 semesters. And yeah, to start with, I would of course like to thank my host Rotary Club, the Moreton Bay Rotary Club. You guys are awesome. When I came here, half of the club was at the airport with a huge Finnish flag. And the first thing what we did, we went to my councillors Chris and Barbara Bryan's house, and we had a welcoming lunch. And since then, they have been just awesome. Soon after we came here, we got to know the Peace Fellows. We started bonding together. We also got to know the other Rotary Fellows, such as the Ambassador Scholars and the outgoing Peace Fellows. We started doing things together. We started celebrating birthdays together. We had dinners at Jake's place. We had dinners with hats at our house. We had bigger pasta dinners at Giorgio's place. We learned how to conquer worlds when we were playing these board games. And we learned the skills of diplomacy. We went road tripping together. We've been wine tasting together. We've been to footy games. We've been hiking in Stradbroke Islands. And of course, we went to Canberra this February to meet the local Rotarians there and to get to know how the Australian government works. We visited local Rotary clubs here in Brisbane, and we've got visited by our loved ones. We've been to our AFEs. Personally, I went to Europe to work with an organization, as Bryn mentioned, the European Peacebuilding Liaison Office, and we were lobbying the European Union to have more sustainable peacebuilding policies. I really enjoyed my work, but of course, the thing that we've most done is studying, and we've been studying really hard, of course, and sometimes a bit too hard. And then after we study too hard, we have to go to a park and take a little break and have a barbecue, or we have a small party at Jake's place, Joe's place, actually. Yeah. Or sometimes those parties get a little bit out of hands. And then often the next day we have a Rotary function, and we need to be really sharp, and we need to represent. And sometimes we try a little bit too hard. And sometimes we just fail miserably. But most of the time everything goes pretty well, and we get to meet these really interesting people, such as the Rotary International Presidents or the past presidents. And of course, as you all are here today, we get to organize this really nice event where we get to share our stories, the Rotary World Peace Fellowship Seminar. Soon, in about a couple of weeks, hopefully, we are going to graduate as Masters of Peace and Conflict Resolution. But what is it that we have actually learned during these 3 semesters, during these 1.5 years? As I said, apart from those experiences, all that free time and all that fun, as I said, most of the time we are still studying really hard. We have 3 semesters, which equals to about 10 courses. And in these 10 courses, we learn things such as the international relations theory, peace and conflict resolution theory, ethical dilemmas and debates and perspectives. We talk about peacekeeping. We have courses on peacekeeping, peace building, arms control. We look at the culture's role in conflicts and other factors such as social factors or political and economic factors role in different conflicts. And in this next section, I'd like to focus a little bit more on 3 courses that we have had and look at those courses tell you a little bit what we've been actually learning in those courses, and then have one example of each of those courses to give you sort of an idea what kind of debates or what kinds of dilemmas we are dealing with. And to start with arms control and disarmament, in this course we look at the international efforts to control manufacturing, possession and transfer of different types of weapons, from small arms and light weapons to cluster ammunition, to mines, to biological and chemical weapons, and of course to nuclear weapons. And we look at different international treaties and different NGOs that are working at this field, different governments that are doing initiatives. And we look at the future prospects for taking these initiatives further. And we also, of course, engage with constraints. Here, the key debate would be the so-called deterrence theory. The deterrence theory suggests that nuclear weapons have actually kept peace. Because of nuclear weapons, we've actually had peace for the past 70 years, at least between the superpowers. So this theory would argue that because these weapons, if one country possesses these weapons, it will deter other countries in attacking or launching nuclear weapons to that country or even attacking there. And there's this concept called mutually assured destruction that, for example, during the Cold War, if Soviet Union had launched a nuclear weapon to the US would have responded, and at the end of the day, they both would have been destroyed. So this theory suggests that because of this mutually assured destruction, they don't want to start fighting. Of course, there's the other side of the coin, the people who think that this is, I cannot say that word, but who disagree with this view. And they would say that, of course, nuclear weapons are actually making the world much more unstable and unsafe place. They would call this system nuclear apartheid, and they would say that we have these 5 countries in the international system, these permanent 5 members of Security Council that are sort of allowed to have nuclear weapons. They are, of course, the United States, China, Russia, United Kingdom, and France. And because of this, other countries have actually incentives to get nuclear weapons. And this is a trend. Like we've seen Pakistan and India, we've seen North Korea, and we've seen Israel already acquiring nuclear weapons. And this seems to be the trend. There are other countries such as Iran, and Syria that also have currently nuclear weapons programs, and there have been many others. And as long as these countries are not giving up their weapons, there is always an incentive for other countries to acquire nuclear weapons. And at the end of the day, the deterrence theory's logic would go as far as that, of course, then all the countries should have nuclear weapons. And can somebody actually argue that that would make world a safer place? So, and furthermore, there's one more point, which is terrorism, that, of course, terrorists can also acquire possession of nuclear weapons, and as long as we have more countries, as long as we have more nuclear weapons, this is always a huge threat. So this view would disagree totally with the deterrence view and say that the more nuclear weapons there are in the world, the more unsafe the planet will be. And this is one of those debates. If we look at the course on peacekeeping, here we look at the history and evolution of particularly UN peacekeeping. We look at the different operations and their mandates. We look at the doctrines such as rules of engagement, when interventions are legitimate. We look at the issue of use of force. And use of force is something I'm going to just briefly talk about a little bit. In 1993 in Somalia, the state government had collapsed. There was basically a civil war, and the US and the UN were trying to, according to them at least, to stabilize the country. And in Mogadishu there was a really important meeting between some clan leaders in a place called Abdi House. And the US got to know that there might be some people who they regard as terrorists or who were fighting against them, and they decided to do a huge operation to that place. Now, in reality, this place was this thing was a meeting between clan elders, and most of these elders were actually trying to convince the other elders or leaders to stop fighting against the international community and give up arms and so on. What the US did, they went there for the first time in this operation, pretty much against the UN rules. They did not warn any civilians, they just raided the house, and lots of civilians got killed. And if you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down, this movie is about the situation right after Abdi House raid. The conflict escalated, there were lots of hundreds of thousands of people have died in this conflict since then, and of course thousands of people have had to leave the country. So you could say that in that case, too much use of force actually escalated the conflict or triggered the anger of people, and the conflict escalated.